women to be a part of this industry and to make their voices heard. Promoting, supporting, and inspiring women of all cultural and ethnic backgrounds means taking a stance in difficult conversations like this one. We would be remiss if we did not support our Asian sisters today and our community representing all genders and races through the struggles and circumstances that they are disproportionately facing in today's social climate, as we would stand with all of our sisters of all races. Women in 3D printing does not tolerate any racial discrimination in any form or at any time. As a reminder, we will be recording this event, so just keep that in mind. And I'd like to hand it over to Janet so that she can give a little bit of background and history on this topic.
So I'm going to give a really quick history lesson as to where Asian racism began in America. So it all started about 236 years ago when the first 3 Chinese actually landed on American soil in 1785. And during this time period, there were a lot of immigrants that were arriving into America. And around 1798, due to the landscape, the Naturalization Act was instilled. And this was one of the first signs of systemic racism beginning in America. Specifically for this discussion, Asians were not allowed to own property or vote during this period of time. And around 1850s, there were about 20,000 Chinese that actually immigrated over to America in hopes to build a better future, mining the gold in California. And during this time period, a lot of folks felt like Chinese people were taking away jobs from the Americans because they were willing to work at lower wages. And during this time period, a lot of violence occurred towards the Chinese folks as well. And systemic racism continued with the foreign miners tax, which was taxed on folks that contributed to this mining of gold. And eventually, with this tension that led to the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Chinese Exclusion Act meant that Chinese people were no longer allowed to immigrate into America. And to add to the level of complexity, in 1899, the bubonic plague that actually came from China, the second version, entered into America. And this actually caused a huge outbreak, especially across the west to mid section of the Americas. And what's really interesting is whenever there's a pandemic, oftentimes racism is fueled. One example could be the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu, actually, the first case was known in Kansas, USA. But because the Spaniards were the ones that promoted this the most on TV at the time, it was then nicknamed the Spanish flu, which is unfortunate. And we all know what happened in the 1940s when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor during World War II. And during this time period, again, another level of systemic racism occurred where Japanese, about 100,000 were sent to internment camps in America. And here, not only Japanese folks were sent there, but also Japanese Americans, because we thought that they might be spies. However, around 1965, things took a turn in America. There was the introduction of the Immigration Bill Act signed by Lyndon Johnson in 1965. And this was one of the first steps where quota systems were removed based off of natural origin in America, deconstructing of systemic racism. Unfortunately, there was still a lot of tension towards the Japanese due to the World War, and hence also towards Asians as well. In 1982, about two auto workers in Michigan had actually killed this man, Vincent Chin, who was mistaken for being Japanese. He was actually Chinese. And this actually created a huge awareness towards continuous racism towards the Asian community in America, unfortunately. And again, in 2003, another pandemic arrived from Asia, specifically China, called SARS. And in 2021, as we know today, the rise of Asian hate continues with coronavirus, and also most recently, China gaining traction as another world economic leader. There's a whole rhetoric around China as a competitor. This has fueled more rise against Asian hate. And we see this in many ways, from elderly being attacked, the Atlantic spa shooting where 6 Asian women were killed. And over the past couple months, there has been an increase in reports of anti-Asian racism, about 3,800 that have been reported. And a lot of folks, actually, when we hosted this event, people came to us and said, hey, I actually don't see Asian racism. What are you talking about? It doesn't exist to me. And that's amazing if that's how you see the world, because that means we're doing something right. But unfortunately, there's a lot of deep-seated racism that still exists in today's community. And a lot of this could also be directed to what we call the model minority myth. A lot of Asians keep quiet, keep their heads down, just focus on working hard, saving money, becoming contributors to society as doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, what have you, and are then named successful in the American society as we pursue the American dream. And this is actually not a great way to stereotype Asians as the model minority. It actually creates a wedge between Asians and other races because it creates this level of inequality. So we hope that this history lesson and a little bit of information about the current landscape helps with positioning where we are today and why we're hosting this Ending Asian Hate panel.
Thank you very much, Janet. That was fantastic. This is a difficult and personal subject for our panelists to share today, and they deserve our utmost respect and admiration for their strength in sharing their stories today. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So first we have Dr. Ellen Lee. Ellen Lee is the technical leader of additive manufacturing for research and advanced engineering at Ford Motor Company, responsible for leading the technical development of advanced polymer additive manufacturing materials and technologies for functional use in the automotive sector. We have Mina Lee, who is the manager of people and culture at MakerBot. In the last year, she also started a DE&I committee at MakerBot, where employees come together with strategies to help foster an inclusive environment and give back to the community. We have Eliana Fu, who is the industry manager and aerospace and medical manager at Trumpf. She is a material scientist who has an excellent passion and interest in a lot of different subjects. Christina Perla, who is the founder and CEO of MakeLab, which is a 3D printing service company in New York. And then lastly, our moderator, SJ Jones, who is the application development engineer at Siemens Energy in Orlando, Florida, and is also currently pursuing her second master's degree in systems engineering at the University of Central Florida. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to SJ.
Thanks, Haley-Ann. That was awesome. Welcome back, everybody. Take a deep breath. We're about to have a difficult conversation, so just breathe. It's just us. We're just hanging out here, being calm. My name's SJ. For those of you who haven't met me, I work at Siemens Energy, and I'm here today because I experienced a lot of racial injustices over the past year. And to Janet's point, I see that, like, you know, we tend to keep our heads down and we just want to go into work, get through work and power through our careers. But as women, we need to, like, not just focus on what's ahead, but like look side to side, because a lot of our struggles are really interconnected. And I think that the best way forward is if we bond together through our sisterhood. So that's what's bringing me here today. I wanted to support, you know, all of my lovely sisters that are here on the screen with me. So thank you all for being here. Please save your questions till the end, as Haley-Ann mentioned. And is everybody ready to get started? Let's hear some check-ins. Like, are you ready?
Yes. Yes, ready.
Okay.
Yes. Ready.
Awesome. Okay. So I guess I would like to start with asking, you know, what brought you all here onto this panel today? Was there like a specific moment? Was there a news story? Did something happen in your personal lives that you can share with us about what inspired you to join us?
So I guess I'll start. I actually became aware of the panel when Janet approached me. And when she first asked me, I immediately accepted, because I had increasing feelings of distraught and helplessness with all of the growing reports of anti-Asian violence. And, you know, to that point, you know, with the Asian culture in my upbringing, I tried to keep a low profile, keeping my head down, and it was just becoming too much. And so when Janet first approached me, I immediately said, yes, I would love to do something about this. I knew something had to be done. And then almost just as immediately, I had doubts about being on the panel, because I realized I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what to do. But, you know, I've made this decision. early on that I will, try as much as I can to embrace any opportunity to grow by working outside of my comfort zone. And so, I continued through, and I met with this awesome group of women. And during the first meeting that we had to prepare for the panel, I knew it was exactly the right thing that needed to happen, and the panel couldn't happen fast enough, because it was during the discussions, understanding that having this forum in which we could talk openly about our own stories, share our concerns, our experiences, and talk about different strategies that we developed coping with the challenges was good enough to be helpful. And we don't need to have all the answers, but we do need to support one another. And so that was really the reason behind the inspiration to be able to build awareness broadly, as well as build allyship.
Totally. Thank you, Ellen. That was so well said. Mina, you next, please.
Okay, thank you. Ellen, that's actually pretty much what happened to me also. I was lucky enough to have gone to one of the first Women in 3D Printing happy hours with Christina. And after the slew of really awful hate crimes towards the elderly, I was like, I need to say something. I want to be part of saying something. And it just really made me reflect back on like my grandparents. They came to the US and they were very like heads down. They wanted to fly so far under the radar, and then to have them possibly be targets of hate crimes. It was just, I knew I couldn't just sit back. And the other thing for me is that I think a lot of the media misses backstories, and not to say that you need backstories to show that empathy or express that people deserve empathy through those backstories. But I think that our stories are so unique to us, and they're so important, that I'm really happy to be on this panel and share a little bit about my story.
Thank you so much. Christina, Eliana, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. I also immediately said yes to this when Janet came to me asking me to be on it. I also have been very heads down. I am by no means a quiet person. Sometimes I can be. And especially when it comes to racial injustices, I always had been. And with everything that has happened in the past year, I feel more of a responsibility to speak up and be an example of how to speak up and how to do small actions to change things, because change happens at a micro level. And so that's why I'm here today. It's something I'm really passionate about. It's something that I believe should be spoken about and given a stage.
Thank you. Eliana?
Yeah, thank you so much, SJ, and thank you all the other panelists for agreeing to be part of this. How I got involved was, as a person, I've been looking at all the news and all the activities that's gone on since the pandemic began. I've been monitoring the amount of anti-Asian hate crimes. Some even took place in Torrance, California, where I live right now. And for me, the breaking point where a senior was knocked to the ground and then died, and almost instantly, someone else was slashed in the face with a box cutter. And at that point, we have seen Asian people attacked, punched, kicked, stabbed, choked, while bystanders have stood by and done nothing. And I got to the point where I'm not going to stand by and do nothing. I'm not going to slide by with my head down and then just be quiet and do my job and shut up. I'm not going to do that. And that's why I reached out to Nora and the rest of the Women in 3D Printing group to ask, hey, will you help me have a discussion on this? And I also want to thank my employer, Trump. They also asked me if they could help, but they didn't know what to do. And I had no hesitation in thanking my employer for backing me up. As a German company, German background, they certainly know about kind of injustices and so forth. and they actually celebrate diversity, and they recognize things like our differences, and they recognize International Holocaust Day and so forth. So that's why it's so important for me to raise this topic, and thank you all for joining. This is not fake news, this is happening now. And the more that we talk about it and bring these topics to light and say it's okay to feel whatever you feel, but we have to also find positive ways to talk about the subject, to help the situation, not to make things worse, but how we help ourselves and how we go forward. It's so important to me. So thank you, Women in 3D Printing. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.
Wow, that was powerful, Eliana. I'm just like, I'm moved. So you have to give my poor little ticker a moment. So to your point, like, you know, we're not going to keep our heads down. You know, we're feeling the change that's happening, and it doesn't happen on a micro scale, as Christina mentioned. So can you guys tell me a little bit about like how seeing these things has impacted you, maybe at work or at home, even mentally? Let's start with Mina.
Honestly, it has hit me very hard, both socially and professionally. I think as someone who sits in HR, I am constantly thinking about this and constantly thinking about how to address these issues, you know, for all like our BIPOC employees and non, right? So trying to simultaneously be a support system and kind of provide resources professionally for my team, but also while navigating all of this in my own personal life has been very, very difficult. But what has been nice, at least I feel very lucky that, and I recognize that while work is not the best distraction, it has been a very, very productive distraction for myself because I'm in HR. And I think for me, I really like knowing that I can make an impact, hopefully like a positive impact, and like channel how I'm feeling through the work that I'm doing, and kind of at least like giving back to employees and trying to be there for them as well. But yeah, it's been hard. It's kind of a mentally exhausting time right now to be a person of color. On top of feeling incredibly sad and frustrated about it, it's just exhausting, just incredibly exhausting. And I find that, you know, when I'm going outside, I'm like prepping myself for possible confrontations, or I've never thought I would be this person, but I just sit and I think about scenarios of like, okay, if someone was to, you know, say something to me, what do I say? Do I ignore them? Do I mean, in most cases, I will probably ignore them, but like, I don't want to fight anyone, but like, what if I saw someone else getting hurt? Do I intervene? Do I risk then being a target of aggression on the subway? You know, I've had to change my subway habits. My life is not the same as it was before. And it's a lot of thought that I didn't really have to think about on a day-to-day basis. And so it's been very exhausting. However, I do have to say, through all of this, I applaud the Asian women community, because there have been so many groups and healing circles. And there's this one group actually called the Cosmos, who lead these like healing circles or guided meditations that allow people to just rest. And so, yeah, I just feel a lot of gratitude for like what's coming out of all of the difficulties. But yeah, it's been a ride.
I can imagine. It's horrible. It's terrifying. It's scary. Like, what do you do like in those kinds of situations? Who would like to go next? Ellen?
Sure. Yeah. So For me, I think it's affected me more from a mental health standpoint, because I actually have been lucky enough, fortunate enough to not have to venture out so often. And the region that I live in is relatively diverse and liberal. So I haven't myself been the subject of any attacks. Neither have my close friends or my immediate family. But there still has been a significant effect on my mental health. So just as Mina said, I find myself kind of bracing and thinking about what if scenarios and what we should do to prepare ourselves. And, I have this habit of, in general, when I'm stressed or there's something that I'm kind of wound up about, I tend to kind of clench my jaw. And I've noticed that has been happening to me, and sometimes I'll realize that I'm doing this and have to think, okay, well, what's going on? So I think from that mental point of view, it's been tough because many of us have already been super stressed out in the past year dealing with the pandemic, and then having to compound that with all of what we're hearing about racial injustices, all of the police brutality that's been happening towards our Black friends and colleagues. And then now to have that compounded with racial injustice towards Asians has just gotten to, that breaking point. So I think from the mental health point of view, it's just been quite stressful. And so these things, these events, people reaching out to kind of share stories and talk about, what we're trying to do to help one another has made it much better. But there's still actions that I think that we have to do, that we have to understand to do away with these injustices. So in all, it's kind of made me a little bit more introspective about myself and what shortcomings or even what unconscious biases that I have, and made myself aware of, any instances where things could come out that, I didn't think about before, that that could maybe enable some of these discriminatory behavior. So I've been acting a little bit more deliberately with empathy towards any situation, because we all have unconscious biases. In terms of the way it's affected me, kind of just day-to-day living, is it's made me, as I said, introspective. So I've thought back about my past, and I realized that, when I was a kid in middle school, some of the bullying events that I happened to endure, I never considered them to be racism. And until, this point, and I thought, I always thought it was good old-fashioned bullying, maybe not good, old-fashioned bullying. And then at work, I also realized that I had experienced discrimination that was based on the intersection of gender and race. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit that it was my husband, a white male, was the person who introduced me to the term intersectionality to describe what I had experienced. So due to, the stereotype of Asian women being quiet and submissive, I had been rebuked for speaking up and taking a leadership role as being too aggressive and too intimidating. And so I think it was a combination of all these things together and these aha moments that have really helped to strengthen my resolve to be more cognizant and to act with empathy in everything that I do and say.
Yes, that is powerful. Thank you, Ellen, for living your truth. Don't tell me who it was that was bullying you in the workplace, because I will come up there. Have some words. Christina, how has it impacted you?
I, like Ellen and probably a lot of others, have just been backtracking on little moments in my life, things that just kind of stuck with me, and I couldn't really figure it out. And I've been doing the work of re-identifying those scenarios and thinking about, if they happened again, what could I do? not only for myself, but, you know, I'm a business owner and I have employees. And I feel it's my responsibility to set an example of either how to react in those situations if you're being targeted, or how to be an ally and how to stand up for someone and how to treat someone with respect, regardless of race or gender or any other differences. And so I've just been backtracking your entire life is very exhausting. It's very emotional. I've talked with my fiance Manny a lot about this. We talked about his experiences as a Latinx male. I've just been really trying to be on it, you know, and really, really trying to be a good example for others. One of the revelations I had last week when Mina and I had lunch was it really does happen at the small conversation level. It's like those small moments that make a big difference. So it's saying, it's not laughing at a joke, at a racially fused joke. It's like not laughing at something that isn't exactly hurtful, but it's still calling you out in a way. You don't even have to be angry to call it out. There are other ways. Like, Mina, I'm going to use your words, but, you know, if a joke isn't funny, it's like, hey, the 90s are knocking and they want their joke back. That really stuck with me. And
you're welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Because I myself was struggling with like how to approach these, because I'm usually one to either just let it happen, or, you know, just kind of avoid the scenario, the situation or the person, or, you know, just try to avoid and keep my head down. But I've just been trying to identify how and when to exercise being proactive.
Thank you so much for sharing. And now we're going to round it out with Eliana.
Yeah, I've been having a terrible time of it, believe it or not. I know I've got this kind of bigger, boisterous, larger than life personality, is a bit of an extrovert, but I've seen some terrible things even happening in the city of Torrance where I live over the summer. I don't know if you remember in the news, an Asian girl got slapped, and then 2 people in the park where I go were abused by somebody. And it was really funny because the city of Torrance actually has 200 Japanese companies that make Torrance their US headquarters. And so the mayor of Torrance had to do something. Oh, we strongly condemn this kind of thing. But really, honestly, what happened to that perpetrator was just not even a slap on the wrist. And that really put me on edge, because I was like, what? So I have to prepare myself for a fight when I go to the park? Should I ask Melanie to go and print me some, 3D print me some knuckles to wear? You know, I think about these things. And that is, yeah, but it's a terrible place to be, to think every time I go out the door, I could be in a fight with someone. It can escalate. I could be in Trader Joe's, I could be in Whole Foods, who knows? I could be in a Target where someone smashes up the display or blames me for COVID, or who knows? And so I have to check what I'm wearing, make sure I don't get anything that could be used as a kind of choking device. And I don't want to live in a world like that, but that's where we are. And I feel incredibly depressed. I know I've been hiding it really well on the internet, because you wouldn't know it from any of my LinkedIn posts, but I'm suffering really badly. Like, and the other thing that I noticed is if you do get into a fight, most fights end on the ground. So maybe I should go and take grappling classes or do something.
Oh my God. There's some tricks you can do. I promise. My friend organized a really small group of like 3 other women, including in myself. We like learned a few Krav Maga blocks in the park on a Sunday, and it made me feel a lot better. But yes, I agree. The fact that I even had to do that was very disappointing.
It's really disappointing. So Eliana, is there anything that like we can do like as allies to support you, like whether we're on the street or if we're in the workplace?
Yeah, I think that allies and friends can help a lot, just understanding what we're going through. You know, sometimes it's just so hard to ask for help, you know, like I was keeping everything internalized, and my manager at work said, I'd really like to understand what you're going through. How can I help you? I don't know what to do. But the fact is, he's a white male, and he said that, you know, and so that means a lot. That means there are people in this world who care. And there's people like yourselves who's an ally and a friend, and you've been through some of this stuff too. And you also know the fears and the angst that we're going through. And so I think that's the first part of the conversation, is recognizing that these problems exist. And they're not saying, oh, you guys are blowing everything out of proportion. We're not. People have been killed, are being killed. And so that's the first step, is having a conversation, recognizing these issues are here. And then the second, third, and fourth parts are taking the steps for healing, for positive solution, for dialogue, for what we do ongoing. Like, I don't know what all of those answers are, but this right here is a step towards 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Christina, do you have any suggestions for how allies can be supportive of you, whether in the workplace or on the street?
There's been a lot of conversation, I think, just in general, especially with the Black community too, of how to be an ally, and a lot of it is about using your privilege for good. So if there's a way that you can step in or speak up for someone who maybe can't at a moment, because it is really shocking, at least for me, sometimes when I have hate directed towards me, it's really difficult. I find it really difficult to react in a positive way. And even in an angry way, I really just freeze up. And so, having someone there to help me find that strength in a moment is extremely helpful. And I think that's one of the smaller, more common things that allies can do to help.
Can I piggyback off of that?
Yeah, please do.
There was a tweet that I recently saw and I absolutely loved it. And it was, I don't think cis guys realize how much power they can shift in a conversation by casually telling their friends, that's messed up, man, when someone says something bigoted. And unfortunately, in our current society, like cishet white males and white people have a lot of inherent value in conversations. And while I don't want to be spoken for, in those moments where I feel like I'm being attacked, or if there's a microaggression thrown my way, there is a lot of thought that goes into me being like, do I ruin the mood by telling them, hey, I'm offended by that. That's really messed up, because I'm actually being the person attacked, right? So I'm immediately the defensive, right? While I'm being defensive, I'm on the offensive because I'm attacking this person for attacking me, right? So when someone else calls it out in a very casual way, they're not speaking for me, but they're able to just be like, hey, that was messed up. Like, let's move on. I can breathe a little bit easier knowing that someone else has my back. And that's in just a negative sense. In a positive sense, like if you can imagine like sitting in a room with people and suddenly someone is amplifying your suggestion or your voice, you're in a meeting and you have a colleague who is a white male that was like, hey, actually, I heard that was great. That was a great idea. That level of like almost subtle and passive support builds over time, and the accumulation of that, I think, makes that strong impact that Christina was talking about, right? It's every one of those little interactions helps like reform those neurological pathways to making a positive impact.
Yeah, I 100% agree with the advocate. So I think not only in this situation of social injustice or racial injustice, but in any case in which we see inequities happening or exclusion, that advocates are really what is key to overcoming some of these challenges, no matter what the marginalized group is. It's the group that has the power at that time, also has the power and the privilege to support and defend and speak up for that marginalized group. And, that marginalized group can change depending on situation. Even, so I'm gonna throw my husband into the story again. When he comes to some of our family gatherings, he's a white het male, right? But he is the only white person in, you know, a sea of Chinese people, and a lot of people are speaking another language. And so, you know, he needs an advocate at that point to stand up for him and say, okay, he said, you know, X, or can we, you know, speak in English, you know, during this time. And so I think, you know, having those advocates is really key, and can help to amplify whenever someone is being treated unfairly or there's some sort of inequity around. And those advocates may not know, may not be aware. And so part of the thing that needs to happen is to build the awareness, to get those would-be advocates to become advocates by, you know, making them aware that there is an issue. You know, if they're, you know, going about their daily lives doing whatever, they may not know that there are some, you know, certain issues happening until they're made aware of it. And so I think part of it is just these types of conversations, having allies, you know, come up to you and ask how they can help. You know, part of it is spread the awareness and make people know, and then where you can, be an advocate.
Amazing. So to summarize, use your privilege for good, start the dialogues so that we can start steps 6 through 7, and don't be afraid to, like, you know, reach out and ask how best you can support. So we're coming up close to the end of the hour, and I wanted to ask each of you if you had a key takeaway message from our audience before we started answering some questions.
I think that all of this has brought about a lot of vulnerability, which I think can be especially difficult for Asian Americans, because we just keep our heads down and keep going and kind of like try to not let anything stop us and just keep our eyes on the goal. But it's important to remember that vulnerability is important. And it's also the thing that's most scary about vulnerability is lack of control, and lack of control over your story, your narrative, and the fear of it being twisted. But at the end of the day, like, your story is your story, your views are your views, no matter how polished they are or not, they're still your opinions, and you control your own narrative.
Thank you so much. Yes, Mina, you next.
Golf clap. Yes. that speaks to me clearly.
Mina, do you have any takeaways for us?
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about this. I think I have 3 points. The first is, like, as an ally, I would just be mindful of, like, your relationships with others. I think, you know, some people don't want to be approached and talked about it because it tokenizes them. Some people do want to be acknowledged and have this conversation. So just recognize, like, you know your audience. And, like, if you have that relationship, just being like, hey, I'm here. That, I think that's fine. And then second is to lead with empathy. Realize I can't speak for all Asian Americans or all BIPOC, but I am personally going through a reckoning of my own identity. I've had to think about it a lot. And as Christina had mentioned, like, she, you know, dug into the archives of her past, and she was like, you know, I'm doing the same. And I realized, like, wow, have I been fighting these, you know, subservient, docile, like, weak Asian women stereotypes to make me who I am today? Yeah, absolutely I did. And so now I'm like, oh man, did I just, like, form my entire identity through a white lens? Cool. Great. Is this really who I am? I'm thankful for sure. Like, love it, but also like, like, is this my most authentic self? I don't know yet. Still not a fully formed person, still have time to change. So recognize that people of color at one point, if not now, are going through a reckoning of their identity. And that is a tough thing to go through. I'm just learning to love the color yellow because as a kid, I could not play with the other kids who played Power Rangers because there was already someone who was a Pink Ranger and I wanted to be the Pink Ranger, hated the color yellow for a while. So I'm reckoning with the color yellow. So that's where I am at. The second or the third last thing is to really lead with compassion. There are people in everyone's lives that are going to be hurt. And I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, through the lens of like racism or anything like that. But like, if you're in a situation where you feel like you've hurt someone, or, you know, felt like there was a microaggression, focus on the hurt that you caused someone else. I think that their pain isn't an opportunity to talk about you, your guilt, for you to get defensive. And then all of a sudden the conversation is all about that. It becomes all consuming. We are, you know, we shouldn't, that's not the focus. The focus is the pain and the trauma that the person is going through. And ultimately what ends up happening in those situations is that the narrative becomes so lost and jumbled, and the person who is still being hurt is still trying to just be heard. So listen, be compassionate, and just open your ears. Those are my takeaways.
Thank you. I'm going to give you like all this applause. Yes, all the snaps. That was beautiful and amazing.
Yeah, I want to say that I've become super sensitive to the subject of also immigrants or immigrants' plights. I am one. I came here in 2007. It was pretty easy for me. I just got off an American Airlines flight, so I didn't have to deal with what people dealt with like in the turn of the century and all that kind of stuff. But I still get it today. Even at my age, I get ridiculed for my British accent and having an Asian appearance. So I don't know, I mean, like I got a double whammy there, and it never stops. For me, it never stops. You would think that I just beamed down from the Klingon homeworld, because they have never seen an Asian person talking with a British accent. I'm like, you guys just need to just check yourself and just realize there's more people in the world than have your background. And so that kind of thing to me, it just, maybe because of this this surge in anti-Asian hate crimes that I've seen lately, that's just shot it off the charts. It's on past number 11 now. So, but I'd say the awareness, keeping the topic alive, and then just trying to think of new ways to just be inclusive and help people.
SJ, I have one more thing if you can come back
You
to
do?
me.
Oh, yeah,
I
please.
did remember something that I had been meaning to add, that, you know, all of this talk about the social injustices, and I wanted to bring it back to what Janet started with, and I think you mentioned in your introduction about why you were so passionate about this panel, was that I think, you know, as marginalized groups, we do need to come together. We can't let these stereotypes like the model minority continue to drive a wedge among the different races or different marginalized groups. We all experience similar types of things in very different ways, but I think we need to use that to understand and, you know, to act with empathy, as we have all talked about doing, but really band together to help to eliminate these inequalities and exclusions and promote diversity, because it is helpful for everyone. So thanks for letting me add that.
No, thank you for, you know, being so open and like here with us and present with us this morning. So it looks like we have a lot of questions.
A lot. So
cool.
Some of them are directed to individual people, so I will mention that. But first, are there any organizations that you personally represent or are familiar with that the community who is attending today could support?
Oh man, I feel like I can like normally just like boom, 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 boom. But right now I feel very on the spot.
It's okay. Would you be comfortable sharing some of those organizations on your LinkedIn later today?
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. 1000% yes.
Okay, great. So this is a very specific question. This person had faced racism as an international student several years ago. And as an international student, the perceived backlash can be very scary because the status assistantship apprenticeship degree can always depend on the professor. Have any of you faced this or something similar, and any tips to deal with it? And how do you let go of past discrimination? whoever would like to answer that.
Oh my God.
A very deep question on how you let go
These are
of
tough questions.
or
It's the toughest panel I've ever been on.
yeah, even if you can let go of it, you know, at all.
As I said, we don't have the answers.
I can speak to it a little bit because I'm married to an international student, and they went through like a very similar situation where they had like a professor who was like very unwelcoming and was also like slightly sexist and like biased towards them in the lab. So like they would come into the lab and like speak to all the male students first, and then like at the end of like the office hour they would get the last 5 minutes. And it was really messed up, like seeing them like go through all of this. And the best way to like get through it, like as an international student, it's very tricky. Like your funding is like what helps keep you in this country. So I would definitely recommend that like while you're going through it, you try to set boundaries, and you can say things like, I don't think that that's okay to say, or I'm not comfortable when you say things like that about my appearance or about my race or about my background. I worked hard to get here and I'm just as good as anyone else that's here. So I would work on like bolstering and saying those things. And then if the toxic culture continues, then I would highly recommend that you look for different programs, or you apply for like different grants, or move to like an adjacent lab. So my partner was in like a biomedical engineering program and shifted into a biomedical sciences program, and was still able to like maintain the same grants and the same research. So that's my best advice for you. And I would recommend that you learn how to forgive and let it go, and just know that the forgiveness is for you and for your healing, and you can't hold on to that and carry it forward with you, because like everyone on this panel has said, it is exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
We are tired.
Yep.
Thank you. I think that's fantastic. So another question we had is, what is the most appropriate way for outsiders to express their support of you as an ally, or should they even express it at all?
I think that question goes, uh-oh.
Sorry, now try.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, someone's not on mute.
Yeah, in the event, please mute yourself. Oh yes, it's Anne. Hold on. Okay, we should be good now.
Oops. Okay. So I believe this has been mentioned before, but I think it's different for everybody. So, but in general, for those, because they don't know how each person is going to react, because it's such an individual thing, it's good to just ask, is there some way that I can support you? But you know, if the answer is no, or if it seems negative, or someone is not open to speaking, don't press it, because there are situations where some people feel, you know, not only do I need to deal with all of what I'm going through mentally, but I don't need to be the one to kind of validate you for being supportive, right? So I think it's very important to understand that you don't want to be a burden in that role, but open yourself up to the possibility that the person you're approaching might indeed need somebody to talk to about this. So I think just simply asking, is there something that I can do specifically that can support you, is just the first step. And then try to kind of react to whatever their response is. But be aware that, you know, it can range from not being a burden on that person to being just a sounding board to listen, to let that person vent.
I think too, offering a safe space to talk and without the pressure of, I mean, these are tough topics and there's a lot to unpack. I don't think that any individual has all the answers, but sometimes just creating that safe space for a loved one, for a friend, can be tremendously impactful. And it just takes listening and opening that door and putting aside any guilt for any past things that you may have done to hurt someone. Put away all egos, put away any wanting to save your friend, put that all away and just listen, because there's a lot of work. There's a lot of identity work that I think a lot of people are doing right now and could use support with.
I totally agree with that. I like both of you guys just like took the words right out of my mouth. I have like nothing more to say besides that, like just even asking, or what was actually really thoughtful was right after the shooting in Georgia, a couple of my colleagues just say, hey, like, I'm thinking about you. And then basically just left it at that. They like fluffed it up a lot more. I'm very much paraphrasing, but they were just like, hey, we're thinking about you. And that in itself was all I needed. Like, I don't think that like I would, want to share, my entire like what's going on. But just having that kind of smaller levels of support, being like, hey, if you need anything, my door is always open to like hear and listen. Like, that is great. But kind of leading again with empathy during this time, because everyone is going through this journey, is really important. So yeah, just even showing support with just a really small gesture as just asking like, hey, like, I'm here for you, and not asking the question like, what can I do for you? Because it's not always about that sometimes, right? Because then I have to think of what you can do, and I don't want to think about you. I want to think about me. I'm sorry, I do. I want to think about how best I can move past the situation, not how you can help me move past the situation. So just even being like, hey, I'm here. If you need anything, let me know. But like, yeah, like I'm thinking of you. That's as simple as that sometimes.
I will say the one thing that is on each of us is to ask for help when we need it.
Oh, yes.
Because a lot of times we are not willing to ask for help. So if there is something that you do need from your friends, your family, your allies, ask for it.
I find though that at least with super close friends and family, those conversations can be extremely difficult, especially if you've built up those walls and you kind of are uncomfortable with being vulnerable. And so I guess, I don't know if it's okay for me to ask a question, but my question to you guys is, how do you ask for help and in a way that doesn't come off as aggressive and angry? Because, the initial message of like, I'm having a tough time with this is definitely not aggressive or angry, but people sometimes don't know how to respond to that. And they don't know what to do. They really don't know what to do. They're confused, and it's weird.
Christina, it doesn't seem like a you problem. It seems like a them problem. That's all I'm gonna say. If they're thinking, and I feel like I've shared this with you too, it's like, if they think you're being aggressive, like, you're not. They're taking it as being aggressive, right? Like, their sensitivity to aggression is higher than, their perception of it is aggression, but it's not. It's you are strong about setting your boundaries of what you want to tolerate or can tolerate at this time. And I think that's okay. And you can set those boundaries, and you can be as forceful as you need to, because guess what? They're your boundaries. No one should come in and break that wall unless you want them to.
Yeah.
So we are running out of time, and so I want to make sure Eliana is back on the phone with us, and I want to see if Eliana wanted to add anything to the question that everyone answered about what is the most appropriate way for, in your opinion, for people to express their support, if at all, and see if you were able to speak to that, Eliana.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm sorry, the Klingons must have interrupted the internet just now because they didn't like me talking about them. But I think one of the most important ways is to join groups. I think when we're alone, we're individuals, and it's far more difficult to solve your individual problems alone. And just knowing that this amazing group of people today on this call are feeling the same way I do, have the same hopes, fears, and aspirations that I do, is part of that healing process and way forward. So, you know, any advocacy groups or anything we can do for positive change, anything you want to do to help yourself. Don't forget, I think most people's employers also include, if you include medical coverage, you can get up to, I think, 5 sessions of counseling that's included as part of your benefits. So do look into that. And it's okay to ask for those kind of things, because they're part of your compensation.
Thank you for that. I think that was great. The last question that I have is actually for SJ. What is the best way, in your opinion, to potentially diffuse a violent situation? You are on mute, SJ, by the way.
Sorry. Yeah, I was caught off guard. Like a violent situation?
Yeah.
I would, for the panelists, or for like anyone who's looking to ally, like if you see someone like being attacked or even just like being harassed on the subway, and you're feeling confident and you're having a good day and you're like, all right, here we go, and you're not going to freeze up because you practice this at home. Yeah, you're ready to rumble. Call them out. Like I have a practice phrase where I just like look at them like, that's not okay, or don't speak to her like that. And just like confront them directly and like make eye contact. And so like if they're bullying you, it's easier to make eye contact and stand tall. But if they're bullying someone else, you want to like slide into the vision, like block their view of the person that they're trying to harass, so that they have to like go around you and make that conscious effort. And don't engage them when they try to like make fun of you, or if they start trying to argue with you or dismiss you, just like don't engage them. You've already said your piece, you've laid the boundary, that's not okay. Second off, you can try and engage the bystanders that are like nearby to try and get help, especially like if you're worried that this person might be armed or they might be dangerous. You can scream out like, that man in the red shirt is harassing me, or that man in the red shirt is going to hurt me, I need help. And as like an ally, like for my allies who are like introverted or who are more like nervous, like if you froze in the first moment, this is where you come in. You can come in and say, hey, I see what's going on, I'm gonna wait here with you. Or hey, I see what's going on, I'm not going anywhere, I'm gonna call the police. Things like that. And then, you know, make sure that like when these situations happen, like if you're like the ally that's there and you're like, you know, I work for a prestigious company, or like, I don't really want to get too involved, I don't want my name in there. Like there's still things that you can do too. So like document the situation that's going on, take photos of license plates, write down descriptors of what the harasser looks like. You can like record the scene and save it to document later. If you're not comfortable going to the police because of all the things that are happening with the police right now, you can, you know, save the confrontation for later. And like if that person is wearing like a polo from like where they work or something, you can even like report it to their workplace and let their workplace handle it as an alternative to like letting the police handle it. But there are a lot of like online organizations that record like the attacks on the Asian community, and it's really, really important to report these attacks when you see them, so that they know where they're happening, and that we can have like a better record of where we need more security in the community.
IHOLA Back is a great bystander training.
Yeah.
A lot of free bystander training sessions. I highly recommend for everyone to do that.
Yeah.
So, so just a couple things to wrap it up. Thank you for that answer, SJ. you know, something that I want to re-quote Mina on, just because you said something incredibly powerful in the middle of this panel today, was I don't think that cis guys realize how much they can shift the conversation when someone around them says something bigoted. Well, I don't want to be spoken for in moments when I'm feeling attacked. I'm being defensive while on the offensive. When someone calls it out in a very casual way and says, hey, that was messed up, I can breathe a little easier knowing someone else has my back. Paraphrased a little bit, but that entire statement was just such an excellent example of what you can do as an ally to express support when it's needed. And I thought that that was just a really incredible point to make. And just as a disclaimer about what to do if you are in a violent situation, you know, for our audience today, it's unfortunate that we have to tell people how to protect themselves in situations where you are targeted from a legal perspective as well. The best thing that you can do to make sure that you are not impacted in a legal way after you've defended yourself is to run, scream, and document. Like what SJ said, take pictures, take videos, get license plate, get, you know, whatever you possibly can, because you're going to need to be prepared to defend yourself, you know, after it. And it's unfortunate, but it's just the way that our messed up world is. So I want everybody to keep that in mind as you go back out into the world. Something else that struck me that Christina said was, you know, how do we not be seen as aggressive when asking for help? And I think the fact that that question has to be asked highlights a lot of the issues that, that we wanted to create this panel for. So I hope that this panel was as eye-opening and powerful as it was for all of you, as it was for me personally. And our colleagues and friends are fighting these battles every single day. And it is the responsibility of the community to stand up and say enough is enough alongside those who are fighting these battles, whether it's for women, for the Black community, for the Asian community, whoever it is our responsibility to be the change that we wish to see for these individuals. And this is not about us. This is about them. This is about their pain and is about their trauma. So like Mina said, ask a question and respect the answer. Listen and support. If they don't want to talk to you, then don't talk to them. It is their right to engage in that conversation with you. There have been some really excellent resources listed in the chat today by Jolene Jang and Janet Carr. I would encourage everybody to check out those resources like we discussed before as well. Follow our panelists today on LinkedIn. They will post some organizations later today that they would encourage you to take a look at. And I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us this afternoon for this incredible panel. And thank you so much to every single one of our panelists, Ellen, Mina, Christina, Eliana, and our moderator, SJ, for participating and for having this incredible courage to stand up today and share with everyone about this very personal topic. So like I said, I encourage everyone to connect with Women in 3D Printing on LinkedIn and our panelists individually, who would be happy to direct you to some resources if you are facing similar struggles. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Janet to briefly talk about these safety tips, and we hope you have a good rest of your day.
I know we are. Thank you everyone for speaking up today and being so brave. Really appreciate it. So a couple of things here that are more actionable. If you do see a hate crime taking place, on the left-hand side, there's stopaapihate.org. And there's also the FBI that started a page where you could report these hate crimes. So there are links right there. We did talk about other safety tips. So we will be updating this document based off of our discussions today. But on the left-hand side, you'll see 5 things to consider when experiencing hate. And on top of that, if you witness it, 5 things that you could follow if you witness it. And last but not least, we also talked about being informed, staying informed as to what's going on. If you're interested in donating, there are a lot of AAPI efforts that we'll share later on. Stopaapihate.org has a bunch of communities you can donate to. A lot of those funds are used to help support the elderly. There's the Oakland Watch group that helps bring older folks across town as they're going grocery shopping so they're protected, versus we have also groups that are looking at how they can use the funds to help bring justice as well. If you see this happen, we hope that you can also reach out to your elected officials, ask what they're doing about it if they're not doing about it today. If you want to make an impact in your workplace, you can work with your HR department or your manager and find out what are they doing about it? Are they denouncing racism? And how are they working towards social justice? On top of that, you can also take the time to support Asian businesses. Due to the current situation, a lot of Asian businesses, Chinatowns are suffering from business and hard to keep a living. So you can go there and show your support as well. Women in 3D Printing is also organizing a Slack channel. I added the Slack invite into the chat so you can join it. And under the hashtag channel social justice, we have these wonderful ladies and other folks that are in the community that are happy to listen and be there for you. And if you're an ally interested in learning what you can do as well, this could be an environment where you could show your support and help be that sounding board for one of our sisters and male allies as well. Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand it back to Helian.
Thank you, Janet. So like I said, another thank you to all of our panelists and for everyone who joined us today. We will be posting the recording later this afternoon so that you can share this with your colleagues. I would encourage you to share this, the recording of this panel on your own pages, because the more people who can hear the message that we've shared today, the more of an impact we can make to our own community and really impact change. So thank you again, and we hope to see you on our next event. All right, have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Thank you.